Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I'm going to talk about tuples in C++. So a tuple is very similar to an array, so you still have indexes, you can still access different elements of the tuple using different indexes, but the tuple basically can store multiple data types at the same time. So let's go over all of this in this video. So the first thing to do is to include the tuple like so. Now, to create a tuple, I'm going to write tuple and then these angle brackets. And then here I'm going to define the data types of the elements that I'm going to put inside of my tuple. So for example, I want an integer, another integer, a string, a character, and another integer, and that's enough. So now I'm going to name my tuple. It's going to be called T1. And in here, inside of these parentheses, I'm going to put the elements of my tuple. So for example, 2 minus 79, a string, for example, hello, a character W, and another integer. Perfect. So now we have a tuple that is created and initialized with different elements. So now, how do I access these elements? Now, I don't really know any ways of iterating through tuples in C++, and I don't think they exist. Sadly, you have to access each element one by one, and you can do that by saying, so cout, and I'm going to use this function get. So although the tuple has indexes and fixed positions for each element, you can't use the square brackets notation. You have to use this get function. And inside of these angular brackets, I'm going to put the index of the element that I want to access. So for example, 2, and now parentheses and the name of my tuple. So basically, this is going to get the third position inside of my tuple. So this is going to give me hello. So now if I run this code, this is going to output hello. If I put, for example, 4 in here and I run this code, this is going to give me 20, right? If I put 3, this is going to give me W. And this is how you can access elements inside of the tuple. Now, you don't really have to initialize the elements of your tuple up here. So I'm going to delete this. And instead of that, I can use a function called make tuple. So I'm going to set this equal to T1. So T1 is going to equal make tuple. Now I'm going to put the elements again. I could have copied them. I don't know why I didn't do that, but let's just do this really quickly. So W here and 25, for example. And now my tuple has these elements right here. So that's what the make tuple function does. So if I say cout get one of T1, then this is going to give me 1. Okay, perfect. Now you can also use this get function right here to modify elements in the tuple. So I can say get 2, for example, of T1 is going to be, what is this? So the 2 is going to be a string. So this is going to be, for example, Mike. I don't know, just something random. So now if I cout the index 2 of this tuple, I'm going to output Mike. So as you can see, my tuple was changed. And basically these are the basic principles of the tuple. So you can use this make tuple function to create a tuple when you don't want to initialize it after you define it. You can also initialize it after you define it. If you want, you can put parentheses here and define the elements when you create the tuple. You can use this get function to access and modify elements in your tuple, and that's basically how a tuple works. Now let me show you some really useful methods that you can use with the tuple. Just always remember that the data types that you put in here in the tuple definition have to match the data types that you pass into the function. So let me delete all of this. I'm going to create 2 tuples. They're only going to have 2 integers, so this is going to be T1 and tuple int, and this is going to be T2. And let me initialize this as 1, 2, and this as 3, 4, for example. 3, 4 like this, and let me delete the space. Okay, so I have 2 tuples here, and I'm going to show you 3 very useful functions that you can use. So the first function is going to be the tie function. So I'm going to create 2 integers, a and b, right here. I'm not going to initialize them. And then I can say something like tie AB equals T1, for example. And now let me see out A, and then just a space, and then B, like so. Okay, so basically what this does is I've created two integers, a and b, and I've created a tuple, t1, which has the elements 1 and 2 inside of it. Now, using this tie function, basically what I've done is I've set a and b to be equal the values of my tuple. So a is going to equal 1, b is going to equal 2. So now if I run this code, this is going to output 1 and then 2 with the space in the middle. Okay, so that's what the tie function does. Now keep in mind that this is not going to work, of course, if the tuple doesn't have the same data type as the variables that you said it equal to, and it's not going to work, obviously, if the tuple has more or less elements than the elements you put in here. Okay, so you have to be careful with that, but you can use this function to assign the values of the tuple to the variables a and b. Okay, so that's the first function. Now, the second function is going to be the, let me see here, the tuple cat function. So let me create another tuple here. This is going to have 4 integers inside, like this, and it's going to be called T3, and it's going to be tuple cat T1 and T2. So basically what this is going to do is this is going to concatenate the tuples T1 and T2 together. It's going to add them together, and it's going to put them all in this single tuple T3 right here. So let me see out get 0 of parenthesis T3, and let me copy this right here to get all the elements. So 1, 2, 3, and now let me change this. So 1, 2, and 3. Perfect. So now if I run this, this is going to give me 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so basically what this does is it takes these two tuples and it adds them together and puts them inside of one single tuple called T3. Again, if the tuple T3 doesn't match the data types of the elements of the tuple, this is going to give you an error. And if the tuple T3 doesn't have the number of elements which is equal to the addition of the number of elements of these two tuples, it's also not going to work. So you have to be very careful with that, okay? Now, the last thing that I wanted to show you is going to be the swap function. Okay, so let me delete this, and I'm going to say t1 dot swap t2. So basically what this is going to do is this is going to swap the values of T1 and T2. Again, the number of elements and the data types have to match, but other than that, you can use this function to swap any tuples you want, okay? So let me change this to be T1 and T1. This is going to be 0 and 1. This is going to be T2, and this is going to be T2. Now, if I hadn't swapped the tuples, this would give me 1 and 2, and this would give me 3 and 4. But since I use this function right here to swap them, instead of getting 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to get 3, 4, 1, 2. So the contents of the tuples are swapped, okay? And that's basically all I wanted to show you in this video. I hope this was helpful. I've showed you a bunch of stuff like how to initialize tuples, how to create and assign values to a tuple, the make tuple function, the swap function, the tuple cat function, the tie function, all that. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I will help you in anything you need. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.